Chapter 12. A Rogue's Apprentice. Jacques towered over me, his cruel eyes blazing with drunken fire as he brandished a bloody knife. A searing pain flashed across my throat, and I saw my hands turn red as a torrent of blood gushed from my neck. I tried to scream, but only a muffled gurgle escaped my lips as I fell to my knees and the world around me grew cold and dark. I awoke with a start, Jacques' mad cackling still ringing in my ears. A sudden chill fell over me, and I realized I had fallen asleep in the bath, its water now ice-cold. Through the window above me filtered the pale light of morning, along with the strains of birdsong and that distant wailing chant. Shivering, I clambered out of the tub and donned the clothes Fatima had laid out before setting off in search of Jacques. His bedroom was deserted, as was the lobby, and in the gambling parlor the bodies were gone, though the 3 brown pools of dried blood still stained the carpet. Carrying on down the corridor, I soon came upon an archway looking in on a small courtyard, where Fatima and her girls knelt on wooden rugs, rhythmically rising and falling. I watched this ritual with fascination, recalling vaguely the genuflections of my own Anglican boyhood, till at last Fatima rose and dismissed the girls. "Aisha," Fatima called as they filed from the courtyard. "Ardura al-Fatar." The nearest girl nodded before disappearing through the archway. "Come," said Fatima, beckoning me over. "Eat with me." We sat by the fountain in the middle of the courtyard while the girl laid out a tray of tea and food between us. I watched as Fatima reached for the silver teapot and abruptly raised it high over her head, the tea falling in a tall sparkling column into the glass below. Down it dipped before shooting up again to fill the second glass, all without spilling a single drop. Merci," I said as she handed me a glass. "Your French is strange," said Fatima. "Obviously you are not Monsieur Monod's nephew. Where are you from?" "Dundee," I said, "in Scotland. Well, actually, I'm from London." "London?" said Fatima. "How in God's name did you end up with those men?" "I'm a stowaway, actually," I said peevishly. "It's a long story." "I see. And what is your name?" "Edward." "Pleasure, Edouard," said Fatima. "Mine is—" "Fatima, I know," I said, a little too quickly. It's a very pretty name." "Thank you," said Fatima with an amused smirk. "Where is Jacques, by the way?" I said after a moment. "He won't be coming back here, you can be sure of that," said Fatima. "And good riddance." "What do you mean?" I said. "He saved my life." "Yes, to save his own skin," said Fatima, "and because he finds you useful." "I know," I said proudly. "He says I'm the most natural Morse signaler he's ever met." Fatima winced. "Of course he did," she sighed, shaking her head. "But believe me, Edward, he may find you useful now, but once he is finished with you, he will cast you away." I gaped at her in confusion. There was no denying Jacques was a rough sort of man, a roguish drunkard with a cruel streak about him. But then again, so was father. The plain truth was that were it not for Jacques, I would still be rotting away in the hold of the Richelieu or the dungeons of the Citadel. "You're wrong," I blurted. "He brought me onto the crew. None of the other men wanted me, but he told the captain I could do it. And now he needs me to save them from Captain Barra." Fatima's eyes grew wide with alarm. "Did you say Captain Barra?" she gasped. "Yes, he's holding the crew hostage, and—" Fatima lunged forward and seized my shoulder, her bewitching emerald eyes boring into mine. "Listen to me, Edouard," she said. "You stay away from Jacques and the men he deals with. Captain Barra is not a man to be trifled with. I have seen many cruel men come through here, but none like him. He will kill you and laugh as he does it. Do you understand?" I nodded, and Fatima released my arm. We sat in silence as we shared a meal of bread and sweet dried fruit. Simple though it was, I could scarcely recall the last time I'd had so satisfying a breakfast. It must have been in London, before the war. As we ate, small birds fluttered into the courtyard to drink from the fountain, and Fatima and I fed them from our crumbs. For the first time in a long while, I felt the fires of my restlessness begin to cool, and a strange peace settle over me. I could not help glancing over my shoulder, expecting Jacques to appear at any moment. After all, what was I to do now that he was gone? I was still stranded in a strange land, thousands of miles from home. Yet I dared not broach the subject, sensing, as I did, Fatima's hatred of Jacques. It was not until I noticed a pendant hanging from her neck, bearing the same raised palm symbol as the front door, that I finally broke the silence. "What is that?" I asked. "This?" said Fatima, holding up the amulet. "This is the Khamsa, the hand of Fatima." "Your hand?" "No," Fatima chuckled. "The most beloved daughter of the Prophet, peace be upon him." "The Prophet?" "The Prophet Muhammad." On seeing my blank expression, Fatima set down her tea glass. Muhammad is the prophet of Allah, she explained, and to us Mahometans the most revered and holy man. Like Jesus? In a way, yes. So he's also the son of God? No, said Fatima. He was only a man, but a great and holy one, as was Jesus. They were both great prophets like Abraham and Moses. But Muhammad was the last and greatest, and he who wrote down the Quran, our holy book. I nodded in vague understanding. So is that who you pray to in the streets, Muhammad? No, we do not worship men, that is idolatry. We pray directly to Allah. I must admit I felt rather foolish. Though I'd seen words like Mohammedan and Hindu in Father's books, I had until this moment assumed the many peoples of this world to be good Christians, united under one true Lord and Savior. But here was an entire land of men with different prayers, different books, even a different God. It was bewildering. Yet despite my ignorance, Fatima answered my questions with an unfailing grace and patience unheard of in any English church or school. And Allah, that's your God? I asked. And yours, said Fatima, the God of the Christians and the Jews, the God of Abraham. I blinked in confusion. But how? Fatima laughed. You are very inquisitive. You remind me of my son when he was your age. Is he here? I asked, glancing about. Your son? Suddenly a shadow fell across Fatima's face, and I saw the green fire in her eyes flare up like coals under the bellows, and then suddenly flicker out. No, she said, her voice catching in her throat. He is not. Where is he? I started, but Fatima held up her hand, silencing me. She sat in silence for a long, awful moment, her face screwed up into a mask of pain, before she again regained her composure. I was wondering, I said, changing the subject, what is this place? Once more a grave cast fell upon Fatima's face. Edward, she said, where are your parents? Back in England, I said. Mother will still be in London, I wager, and father will be back on Bell Rock. He's a lighthouse keeper, you see. Perhaps it would be best for them to explain, said Fatima. There are things we are not ready to know until we are older. Why? I said. Please, madame, I know about a lot of things. I'll understand, truly. Fatima breathed a weary sigh and rested her hands in her lap. When you are older, she finally said, you will understand that men desire women. They desire to be with them, to enjoy their bodies. For this, most men will marry, but others, and still many who do, will pay for the pleasure. That is what we do here. I stared at the ground for a long moment, puzzling over the strange answer. Do some men like hurting them? I said, remembering what I had seen from the wardrobe. Fatima nodded gravely. Yes, she said. Yes, some men. Suddenly a loud pounding echoed down the corridor. Fatima! Jacques shouted. Fatima, open up! Fatima rose and stormed out of the courtyard. Moments later I heard the door creak open. I didn't think even you were this stupid, said Fatima. You have 10 seconds before I need to speak to him, said Jacques. What for? Just bring him here. No, that poor boy has been through enough. Now get out of here before I call the Guardia. Edouard, Jacques called. Come over here. I sprang to my feet and scampered down the corridor, but by the time I reached the lobby, Fatima had already shut and bolted the door. He wanted to give you this, she said, contemptuously, handing me a large book. I gasped as I saw the 3 swordsmen, weapons held high, traced in gold leaf on the cover. Overcome with excitement, I unbolted the door and threw it open. Viens, said Jacques, waiting outside. We have work to do. But suddenly a flurry of footsteps came thundering down the corridor. Edouard, what are you doing? Cried Fatima as she barreled past me. He's coming with me, said Jacques. Not if I have anything to say about it, said Fatima, standing between us. It's all right, madame, I said. I want to go. We still have to free the crew. You heard him, said Jacques. At this, Fatima knelt down and placed her hands on my shoulders, staring me right in the eye. Don't do this, Edward, she pleaded. He will only get you killed. For an instant, that vision of Jacques, cackling and brandishing that bloody knife, flashed through my mind. As seeing the fear and desperation in Fatima's eyes, I felt a sudden pang of doubt. What is he supposed to do here? Jacques scoffed. Serve his clients? He can work, said Fatima, rising to face him. He can help with cleaning, with laundry, with errands, until he earns enough for a ticket home. He has better things to do than clean Spanish filth off bedsheets, said Jacques. I think he's had enough menial work for one lifetime. Pas vrai, Edouard? Perhaps it was the book in my hands with its alluring cover, or merely simple boyish bravado, but in that moment I made up my mind and crossed the threshold to Jacques' side. Thank you, madame, I said, nodding graciously. For everything. Then Jacques placed his hand on my shoulder and led me away down the alley. I shall never forget the look of devastation in Fatima's eyes as we strode away. I had seen it only once before, in a London doorway on a cold November night long ago. But soon we rounded a corner, and she was lost from sight. Thank you, by the way, I said, holding up the book, and for saving my life. There won't always be someone there to save you, said Jacques, reaching into his pocket. You're going to have to learn to protect yourself. Here. He handed me a small folding pocket knife, on whose handle was engraved a curious figure dressed in a tasseled triangular costume, like a Christmas tree with legs. What is this? I asked. A duk-duk, said Jacques, some kind of native sorcerer from Polynesia. Thank you, I said, beaming at the marvelous object in my hand. Pulling open the blade, I found it to be no less beautiful, a sharply curved, exotic-looking thing covered in intricate etchings. It felt good in my hand, and as we made our way down the alley, I began to wave it through the air, thrusting and parrying against imaginary foes. Put that away, Jacques snapped, slapping down my hand. You want to survive? Lesson 1, never let anybody know your strength. Let them underestimate you. Strike when they least expect it. Nodding, I folded the knife and slipped it into my pocket. Not 2 blocks from Fatima's, we reached an inn where Jacques had rented a cramped, dingy room. The moment we entered, he reached under the bed and produced a small bottle of clear liquid. Then I noticed how badly his hands were shaking, the bottle sloshing as he raised it to his lips. What is that? Buka, said Jacques, wiping his mouth. Nasty stuff. These damn Mahometans don't drink alcohol. This garbage is all you can get in this place. Why? It's against their heathen religion, said Jacques. Now come on, we have a lot of work to do. We disguised ourselves as locals, donning hooded cloaks and darkening our faces and hands with brown boot polish before venturing out into the crowded marketplace. Abandoning the frantic pace of the previous day, we followed the natural ebb and flow of the crowd. In this manner we breezed past dozens of looming soldiers without incident. Somewhere in the shadowy maze we came upon a small shop glittering with dozens of clocks and pocket watches, presided over by an elderly Spanish gentleman with bushy grey whiskers. I need a spyglass, said Jacques. Go get me one. What kind? Any kind. Jacques eyed me strangely as I stood there, palm outstretched. What are you doing? I need the money, I said. I don't have any on me. I didn't tell you to buy it, I told you to get it. You mean steal it? Yes, steal it, said Jacques impatiently. Now go. But don't you have money? From the card game? We need it for food, for lodging. It needs to last. Now go. At my hesitation, Jacques grunted and rolled his eyes. You didn't have any problem cheating at cards last night, he said. But those are bad men, I said. Thieves, murderers, you said. Jacques seized my arm and drew me in, so close I could smell the liquor on his breath. Listen to me carefully, Edward, he said. Here's our second lesson. There are no good or bad men. Only those useful to you, and those who are not. Last night, those men, Fatima, those girls, they were useful to us. Now they are not. That shopkeeper? Right now he's useful to us. Understand? I gaped at him. You stole from your father, yes? Yes? Why? Because to save Prince Pablo, but I wasn't. Exactly, said Jacques. You stole to save someone. Now we must steal to save the crew. I nodded. Good, said Jacques. Now go, and be quick. But how am I? Figure it out, Jacques snapped. Lesson number 3, learn to think on your feet. My heart was in my throat as I crossed the street, rising higher with every trembling step. When I had stolen father's keys and wages, I'd had days to plan the act. I plotted every step with the utmost care and waited for the opportune moment to strike. But now, without warning, I had been thrust unprepared into the fray. My mind, so often buzzing with ideas, had drawn a fearful blank. Approaching the storefront, I spotted a row of spyglasses laid out on the counter. Behind them, the shopkeeper stood bent over a shelf of clocks, brow furrowed in concentration as he carefully polished their faces. If I was quick enough, he would never hear or see me. Gliding up to the table, I reached out and wrapped my fingers around one of the brass barrels. Can I help you? A voice wheezed behind me. No, I said, pulling my hand away. I'm just looking. I dropped my gaze and pretended to peruse the wares on the counter, hoping the shopkeeper would soon return to his polishing. But he remained standing, his owlish eyes following my every move. Is there anything in particular you're looking for? He said. No, I said, flashing a nervous smile. Thank you. You were interested in telescopes. These are all 50 pesetas, a very good price. Yes, a very good price, I said. But I still want to look. The man's whiskers twitched as he gave an indignant sniff, but at last he retreated into the shop, leaving me alone. I continued to peruse the gleaming array of watches, compasses, and magnifying glasses, hoping to throw him off the scent, but every time I glanced into the shop, I saw one vigilant eye glaring back at me. Finally, the shopkeeper lost patience and stormed up to the counter. "If you're not going to buy anything, I must ask you to leave." Hastily, I reached for the nearest spyglass. This one," I said. "I'd like this one." "All right," said the shopkeeper, eyeing me skeptically. "That will be 50 pesetas." He reached down to take the spyglass from my hand. Actually," I said, "could you get a box for it? It's a gift." The shopkeeper paused for a moment, then nodded. "Of course," he said, but instead of retreating into the shop, he continued to reach for the spyglass, and I suddenly realized the trap I'd just walked into. If I carried on, he would soon discover I hadn't any money. My eyes darted about, frantically searching for a way out, before landing on a bamboo cane leaning against the counter. If I bolted out, he would never catch me. But he could call the Guardia. By now, word of our escape must have reached every soldier in Quetta. From the moment the alarm was raised, it'd only be a matter of time before they caught us. "Well," said the shopkeeper, snatching the spyglass from my hand. Excuse me." The shopkeeper and I turned our heads in unison as Jacques strode up to the shop. "Excuse me," he repeated. "Yes, can I help you?" said the shopkeeper. "Yes," said Jacques, bowing deferently. "I have lost my watch. Do you have one like it?" The shopkeeper shot me one last glare before turning to face his new customer. "Certainly," he said, beckoning Jacques to a glass display case. "I have many kinds of watches. Are any of these like the one you lost?" Jacques swept his gaze over the display case. "No," he said, shaking his head. "Mine had the shahada on the cover in gold." The shopkeeper's face hardened, his mouth closing to a thin line. "No, I certainly don't have anything like that," he said sharply. "I don't usually cater to people like you." "Perhaps you could make it for me custom," said Jacques, bowing again. His gruff swagger was nowhere to be seen. It was quite the performance. "That would be very expensive," the shopkeeper retorted. "Then perhaps in the back," said Jacques. "I have seen watches like it elsewhere, but I was told your shop was the best in town." The shopkeeper's mustache twitched again, but with a resigned sigh, he turned and disappeared into the back of the shop, Jacques following close behind. I made my move. Spotting another spyglass tucked amid a display of mantel clocks, I snatched it and scurried away across the street, hiding myself around the corner. There I remained until I heard voices emerging from the shop. "See, I told you," said the shopkeeper. "Now stop wasting my time." "Thank you so much for looking," said Jacques, bringing his hands together and bowing. "Assalamu alaikum." A few minutes later, he appeared beside me. "Did you get it?" he asked. I nodded and produced the spyglass from my robes. "Good," he said, "but you'll have to do better than that next time. Come on, let's go." I followed Jacques as he started back up the road, buoyed by a strange feeling which had come over me. An electric tingle of excitement, the same as I'd felt while hiding in the wardrobe or stealing Father's keys. The ground grew steeper and the alleys wider, the sky opening above us as we scaled the hill towards the mountains. "Jacques," I panted, "can I ask you something?" Jacques gave a grunt of assent. "Who is El Krim?" "He's a bandit," he said. "He and his men live in the Rif, up in the mountains. They raid towns and trains, kill women and children. Spanish and French have been at war with him for a year now." "Why?" I said. Do they do that, I mean?" "They want the whole country to themselves," said Jacques. "To kill all the Europeans, send them away, impose that barbarian religion of theirs on everyone." "But Madame Fatima said they pray to the same God as us." "Hardly," Jacques scoffed. "Their God tells them to cut off the hands of thieves, to stone women to death, to kill all non-believers, to keep multiple wives." I admit I envy them on that one." "Really?" I said. "Oh, yes. And did she tell you why they pray like that, on their knees in the streets?" "No." "There's a holy city somewhere in Arabia, La Mecque they call it. There's a black shrine in the temple there with a holy black rock inside. Every Mohammedan faces towards it when they pray." "They pray to a rock?" "Yes," said Jacques. "They'd still be in the Middle Ages if it wasn't for us, but those ungrateful bastards don't want to be civilized. They want to go back to living in tents in the desert." "That's not anything like what Madame Fatima said," I said, shaking my head. "Of course not," said Jacques. "She works for El Krim." I stopped in my tracks. "But she... Why?" I babbled incredulously. "Remember how I told you about useful people?" said Jacques. "Forget her. Now come on." I walked in silence, troubled by what he had just told me. I could not understand how so kind and generous a woman could be in league with a murderous bandit. Then again, I could not have imagined the kindness that such rough and tempestuous men as Father and Jacques were capable of. I had much to learn, it seemed, about divining the character of men. The sun blazed high in the sky as we reached the rocky scarp at the top of the hill. Here we stopped and looked out over the town of Hueta, the mosaic of white rooftops cascading down into the sea like a child's discarded toy blocks. To the east, a wide spit of land swept out into the jeweled waters of the Mediterranean, with two long moles jutting out to encircle the harbour basin, while to the west the sheer walls of the citadel loomed over it all. As I crouched down to catch my breath, Jacques unfurled the spyglass and raised it to his eye, the spitting image of Billy Bones on the cliffs. After a moment, he handed it to me and pointed off into the harbour, to a basin beneath the citadel wall. I spotted her immediately, the jet-black shape of the Richelieu. "You see her?" he said. "Yes." "Notice anything?" Squinting down the barrel, I swept the spyglass down the length of the ship, her deck crawling with blue-jacketed sailors and marines. "They've crewed her?" I ventured. "No, look beside her on the dock," said Jacques. "What do you see?" "Nothing," I said. "It's empty." "Exactly," said Jacques. "They haven't unloaded her cargo." "Maybe they haven't gotten around to it," I said. "Not likely," said Jacques. "Captain Barr would have worked them through the night, stripped her bare." "No, he doesn't have a buyer yet, so he can't move the goods, which means—" I paused and thought a moment. "If we can steal her back, we can get the cargo too," I said, feeling a tingle run up my spine. "But first," said Jacques, "we've got to get the crew out." "Where are they keeping them?" "Down there," said Jacques. "See the windows?" Swinging the spyglass to the citadel walls, I spotted a row of small arched windows set into their base, covered in heavy iron bars. The square which faced the fortress was packed with people, gathered around a large wooden platform jutting out from the walls. It was also swarming with soldiers. I counted at least 24, with a sentry at each gate and window. It looked impregnable. "How are we going to get them out of there?" "I don't know yet," said Jacques, taking back the spyglass. "But let this be lesson number 4. Always do your reconnaissance." And so we began our long descent back into Hueta. Along the way, we stopped at a tinsmith's shop to pilfer a saw blade, apparently vital to Jacques' unspoken scheme to free the crew. As before, Jacques kept the shopkeeper distracted with idle banter while I slipped in behind him. But by the time we reached the seawall, hours of walking in the blazing sun had taken their toll, and I begged Jacques to stop for a drink of water. After much grumbling over the state of his purse, he at last deigned to spend his last remaining coins on a pot of tea and a water pipe, which he pensively puffed as he surveyed the citadel walls through the café door. "May I try?" I said, gesturing to the pipe. Jacques shrugged and handed me the wand, which I eagerly placed to my lips. Jacques roared with laughter as I coughed and sputtered, the smoke searing my throat. "Don't breathe it in," he said. "Sip it, like your tea." In demonstration, he took a few short puffs and blew a chain of smoke rings into the air. When I had at last caught my breath, I took back the wand and took a hesitant puff. To my surprise, the sharp tang of green apples flooded my mouth. But before I could savor this new sensation, the din of the marketplace was pierced by the sound of distant drumming. A great commotion erupted around us as people flooded out of the shops and cafes to line the Grand Avenue. Jacques and I rose and pushed our way to the front of the crowd just as a mournful tattoo reached us. Led by a corps of drummers, a long procession of horse-drawn carts stretched down the avenue, each carrying a score of coffins draped in the Spanish flag. "Looks like El Crim's at it again," said Jacques. "Just what we needed. Come on." Ducking back into the crowd, we made our way down the avenue to the square beneath the citadel walls. A line of wooden barricades had been strung across the entrance, leaving only a narrow checkpoint guarded by 2 soldiers. Behind them, the wooden platform was revealed for what it was, a gallows on which 5 ragged, bronze-skinned men stood on wooden stools, nooses around their necks. On seeing the condemned, Jacques breathed a sigh of relief. "It's not them," he said. "Who are they?" "Agents of El Crim," said Jacques. "They're lucky Captain Barr is only hanging them." Jacques turns his gaze to the long queue of people shuffling up to the checkpoint. To a man, they were all thoroughly questioned by the soldiers before being let through, with many being roughly searched or having their bags and baskets upturned. "Putain," Jacques cursed. "An hour earlier or later." "What is it?" I asked. "We don't have papers," said Jacques, "or the money for false ones, and even if we did, it wouldn't take them long to spot us." He pulled at his collar, revealing the line of pale skin beneath the boot polish. "So what do we do?" I said. Jacques did not answer, pensively stroking his chin as he turned his gaze from the checkpoint to the harbour front behind us. Slowly, a wry smirk crept over his face. "You see that butcher's stall over there?" he said. "Yes?" "Go get some rotten meat, rotten as you can find, then meet me by the fountain over there." "But why—" "Lesson number 5, Edward," said Jacques. "A lack of dignity can be your greatest asset." Though utterly baffled, I had now come to trust Jacques' authority as a rogue and adventurer and set off without protest. This theft was even more easily accomplished than the last, the butcher being completely distracted by the passing funeral procession. When I rejoined Jacques by the fountain, he had already soiled his clothes with dust and camel dung from the street, so that he looked and smelled positively wretched. In this fashion my own clothes were duly fouled, the effect completed by the secreting of pieces of rotten meat into our pockets. Finally, Jacques handed me a little wicker bowl he had pilfered, into which he placed his last remaining notes and coins. "Now listen to me," he said. "Do not say anything, not one word, except this. Bakshish. It means, give me money. And if someone gives you some, you say, shukran, thank you." "Bakshish, shukran," I repeated. "Got it. Say nothing but this. You know no Spanish, understand?" I nodded. "All right, let's go." As we set off towards the checkpoint, Jacques once again transformed before my eyes, adopting a stooped, crooked posture and a shuffling gait. Within seconds he seemed to age 30 years, becoming the very embodiment of a ragged beggar. Meanwhile I struggled not to retch as the meat in my pockets, heated by the midday sun, sent a nauseating miasma wafting up my robe. "Salam, salam," Jacques wheezed as he doddered up to the soldiers, his outstretched hand like a gnarled claw. "Bakshish mi fadlik, bakshish." "Detener," said one of the soldiers, holding up his hand. "Papeles, por favor." "No papeles, no papeles," said Jacques in halting Spanish, mournfully shaking his head. Soy pobre, bakshish, por favor." "Come forward," barked the soldier, but as Jacques approached, his face screwed up with disgust. "Ugh, they really are dogs, aren't they?" his comrade laughed as the soldier retched into his sleeve. Meanwhile, Jacques shuffled ever closer. "Stop," said the soldier. "Him over there, is that your son?" No comprende, Jacques muttered as the soldier backed into the barricade. Regaining his footing, the soldier struck out with his rifle butt, sending Jacques crumpling to the ground. I rushed forward, waving my basket before me, but my stomach was turning somersaults. Before I could utter a single syllable, I pitched forward and vomited onto the soldier's boot. Despite the din of the crowd around us, everything suddenly seemed to go quiet. Glancing up, I saw the soldier's face flush beet red with rage. As he raised his rifle, I tensed myself and prepared to bolt, hoping to duck into the crowd before he could get off a shot. But suddenly I felt a sharp pain as the soldier landed a backhand blow across my face, and to my astonishment he hastened us through the checkpoint. "Dirty pigs," he growled. "Get out of here." Needing no further encouragement, we scrambled through the gap and melted into the crowd. "That was good thinking," said Jacques, wiping the blood from his nose. "I thought for sure they were going to shoot us." Jacques shook his head. "They're lazy bastards. Shooting us would make too much work, too much trouble." We crossed the courtyard and took our place at the base of the citadel walls, amid a long line of beggars and merchants. As I waved my basket and pestered the crowd with endless cries of "Bakshish," Jacques turned to the dungeon window behind us. "Is the crew of the Richelieu there?" he called. "Capitaine! Ivan? Santos, are you there?" He recoiled as a face suddenly appeared in the window, gaunt with sunken, hungry eyes, a living skeleton. "Y a des Français là-dedans?" Jacques asked. "Francis, ad Francia." The man did not answer. He continued to stare blankly with dead, unblinking eyes. "Des Français," Jacques barked. "Des marins, oui ou non?" "Moineau?" said a voice deep within the dungeon. "Moineau, is that you?" Suddenly the man was pushed aside, and Stéphane, the scarred man, appeared in the window, his good eye burning with pure venom. "Where the hell have you been?" he spat. "Laying about in some bordel, I shouldn't wonder." "Nice to see you too, Stéphane," said Jacques. "You have some nerve coming back here," Stéphane shot back. "We took a vote. If you ever get out of here, you're a dead man, Moineau." "Shame," said Jacques, reaching into his robes. "I guess you won't be needing this." As Jacques pulled out the saw blade, Stéphane's eye widened and his hand shot out through the bars. But Jacques snatched it away. "God damn it, Moineau," Stéphane growled. "Give it here." "Get me the captain," said Jacques. "Give it—" "Go get him." Stéphane hesitated. He's in a bad way," he said. "Bring him here," Jacques insisted. Stéphane retreated into the darkness, and after an ecstasy of jostling and muffled groans, another face appeared in the window. It took me a moment to recognize it as belonging to the captain. He was a terrible sight to behold, his chiseled face reduced to a side of raw beef, mottled purple and yellow. His nose was broken, his beard crusted with dried blood, and his left eye swollen to the size and color of a ripe plum. He gripped the bars tightly, as though at any moment his legs would give way beneath him. "Moineau?" he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. "Good God, Captain!" exclaimed Jacques. "What the hell happened to you?" "Barra," said the captain. "He wants our rendezvous location, but he hasn't gotten it yet." The captain forced a weak smile, revealing a mouthful of broken teeth. I figured, said Jacques. The ship's still fully loaded, and there's a whole crew aboard, waiting. Waiting for me to break, said the captain, nodding grimly. Did you bring water? The men haven't had anything since they took the ship. No, said Jacques, but I got this. Jacques handed the saw blade to the captain, who turned it over in his hands, squinting at it through the slit of his good eye. It's no good, he said, shaking his head. They clear the square at night. If the guards in here don't hear it, the sentries outside will. Then do it now, said Jacques. They'll never see or hear you over this crowd. What's going on out there? Said the captain, pressing his face to the bars. A hanging, said Jacques. Some of Vilcrim's men. It'll be us soon if Barra doesn't break me, the captain sighed. It was then that he noticed me sitting beside Jacques. Is that Edward? He said incredulously. Yes, said Jacques. Told you he was useful. Now come on, you don't have much time. The captain nodded. Ivan, he called into the cell. Get over here. The lumbering Russian appeared a moment later and immediately set to sawing at the bars. Meanwhile, Jacques and I shifted over to cover the window, loudly begging to mask the sound. But not 5 minutes later, a hushed silence fell over the square. Jacques hastily thrust his hand through the window, and the sound of sawing stopped. Across the square, an officer mounted the scaffold, shouting in Spanish. A drum roll began, and all eyes in the square were fixed upon the condemned. When it finally stopped, the officer marched down the length of the platform, kicking the stool from under each man. They jerked and kicked wildly at the end of their ropes, as if performing some gruesome dance, the hempen jig of pirate lore. A great cheer arose from the colonials in the crowd, while the natives remained silent and stony-faced. The grotesque spectacle seemed to go on forever, the men's eyes bulging with terror and agony, until one by one they fell still, swaying gently in the breeze. Okay, keep going, said Jacques, as the rumble of the crowd rose again, and the soft zip, zip, zip of the saw blade resumed behind us. But as I carried on play-acting, holding my bowl out to passers-by, I soon noticed a sudden thinning of the crowd. The square was emptying, leaving only a handful of beggars, merchant, and market-goers, nowhere near enough to conceal a breakout. Stop, I called through the window. Everyone's leaving. Putain, Jacques cursed as he watched the dispersing crowd. Putain, putain. Hey, Ivan, what are you doing? Stéphane called from within the dungeon. He says the crowd is leaving, said Ivan. Putain, said Stéphane. Any more bright ideas, Moineau? Working on it, said Jacques, glancing about the square. His gaze climbed the soaring walls above us, up to the crenellated ramparts with their narrow arrow loops. Then I noticed the tall metal aerial protruding from the top of the turret, and my mind began to race. They've got a radio up there, I exclaimed. Mm-hmm, said Jacques distractedly. What do you suppose they use it for? Receiving orders from Spain, I imagine. Orders from Spain. Immediately my thoughts leapt to Prince Pablo, that great folly of my life, and the germ of an idea began to form. Wait, I said. What if you found another radio? We could send them a false signal, pretend to be Spain. Order them to set the crew free. No, said Jacques flatly. Military signals are sent in code. They would know it was false. Anyway, Captain Barra would not. But what if we... Enough, Edward, Jacques snapped. Let me think. But we could signal the ship, he finally said. Edward, do you think you can climb up there? I followed his finger as he pointed to an arrow loop some 50 feet above us. I shuddered at the prospect. The wall was sheer, its stones close-fitted with hardly a crevice, and lay in plain view of the square and the sentries manning the ramparts. The walls on the far end offered greater concealment, but these overlooked jagged rocks and pounding surf. One false step and I would plummet to my death. No, I said. I don't think I can. Don't tell me you're afraid of heights. I'm not, I protested. I don't even think a monkey could climb that. Jacques cursed. If you could get up there and signal the ship, get her to leave the harbor, she'll be more vulnerable. We can retake her. But what about the crew, I said. Once we have the ship, said Jacques, we can ransom her for the crew. Then why doesn't the captain tell Barra where the rendezvous is? Because, said Jacques impatiently, then Barra will have no use for them and he will have them shot. I have time to explain. Now can you get up there or not? I glanced once more to the window, and with sinking heart I shook my head. I have to get up there somehow, said Jacques. We can't get in through the front door, and nobody but a boy is going to fit through that window. They say inspiration strikes like a bolt of lightning, and I am apt to believe it. For at that moment a singular idea flashed fully formed into my mind. What about the Sutherland boy? I blurted. What? The Sutherland boy, the one the man mentioned during the card game, the consul's son. Yes, I know who he is, Jacques snapped. What about him? Well, the soldier said Captain Barra was looking for him, right? To claim the reward? Yes. Well, I said, grinning ear to ear. What if you found him? Jacques scoffed. Barra's men have been scouring the city for weeks and they haven't found him. How the hell are we? No, I said, pointing to my chest. What if you found him? A look of shock came over Jacques' face. He gaped at me, incredulous. They'd let us right through the front door. Good God, Edward, it might just work. I could not suppress a triumphant grin. Why no, Stéphane called from the dungeon. What the hell is the plan? I think I have it, Jacques called back. We're going to... You! What are you doing? A voice barked, and turning our heads we found ourselves staring down the barrel of a soldier's rifle. Talking to prisoners is forbidden, he said. Get out of here! Under the jabs of his bayonet we scrambled to our feet and scurried away from the wall. Passing the gallows we spied a single colonial staring contemplatively at the 5 dead Arabs swaying from their nooses. Jacques flashed that dastardly grin I'd come to know so well, and I understood immediately. Still high on the thrill of my breakthrough, I sprang into action. Bakshish, senor, bakshish, I chanted, waving my basket in the man's face. No, get away, the man cried, swatting at me with his cane. Nimbly I dodged every swing and jab, dancing around him as he grew ever more irritated, grunting and snorting like an angry bull. And in the midst of his wild flailing, I watched as Jacques slipped his hand in the man's pocket and plucked out his pocketbook. The deed done, I allowed the man to land a few blows and chase me from the square. Well done, said Jacques as he rifled through the pocketbook. If we get the ship back, I'll make sure you join the crew. It suddenly occurred to me that I'd heard more praises in the last 2 days than in all my 3 years aboard Belle Rock. I admit it rather warmed my heart. We wasted no time setting our plan into motion, our first order of business being to purchase a newspaper. As expected, we found a notice of disappearance on the second page, bearing a grainy photograph of a young, dark-haired boy in his public school uniform. Colin Sutherland, Jacques read aloud as we strode through the marketplace. Age 9, height 120 centimeters, hair red. Last seen on the 10th of July. All inquiries and tips are to be reported to the British Consul's residence, 200 Avenue d'Africa. That's it, I said. That's all it says, said Jacques. Well, Captain Barrow's probably never seen him, right? I ventured hopefully. Other than the photograph, I mean. Maybe, said Jacques, but Captain Barrow is governor of the city. He's probably met the consul before, and his son. So what do we do? Only one thing to do, said Jacques, quickening his pace. We pay a visit to the consul. We returned to our room at the inn, where we stripped off our soiled clothes and washed the boot polish from our faces. In the market, Jacques had purchased a box of reddish-brown powder the locals called henna, which they use to tattoo their skin. He mixed this with water in a wash basin and used it to dye my hair, turning it a deep auburn like the real Colin Sutherland. Won't you find it odd, I said, examining myself in the mirror, if I look just like his son? I'm counting on it, said Jacques. Colin has been missing for weeks. His father will be distraught. If you remind him of his son, he may reveal things normally he would not, spill his heart out to us. Nobody is easier to crack than a desperate man. Now, let's go over it again. You're Mr. Charles Dupin, I recited. You're a private investigator and have agreed to take care of me while my father is away on business. Oh, wait, don't I get a false name? No, said Jacques. Lying is easiest when you have little to remember, and there are plenty of Edwards. Now, I don't have my papers because we were robbed on the way here. Where exactly? The Cala de Estadio, said Jacques. Yes, Cala de Estadio, I repeated. Now, said Jacques, when we're inside, what do? Say nothing, I said. Only speak when spoken to and keep my eyes and ears open. Exactly, said Jacques. Listen carefully to everything his father says and keep an eye out for photographs, toys, anything at all. Nothing is too minor. All right, he said, glancing at his watch. One last thing to do. That evening found us sitting in a tailor's shop drinking tea and smoking water pipes as an old Moroccan man fretted about us with his tape measure. Some hours later he emerged from the back of the shop with a pair of bespoke suits, Jacques in a cream linen and mine with a navy jacket and short pants befitting a schoolboy of Colin's age. Admiring myself in the mirror, I marveled at the illusion we had created. Before me stood the spitting image of the boy in the photograph. A little taller and slimmer face, perhaps, but more than adequate for our ends. Our day ended back at the inn, as the evening calls to prayer rang out across the darkening sky. You have the paper, said Jacques, pulling a bottle of bucha from beneath the bed. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a slip of paper he had handed me, bearing 2 signals I was to send upon reaching the radio room, one ordering the Richelieu to weigh anchor, and another informing the cargo's buyer of the rendezvous location. Good. Now best get some sleep, he said, tossing me a blanket and pillow from the bed. We have to be up early tomorrow, before the sun is up, so we won't be spotted. I hung my new clothes over a chair and curled up in the corner beneath the radiator. It was some time before I fell asleep, so apprehensive was I of the next day's mission. Though the plan was mine, I had not until then appreciated the enormity of it. We were marching into the belly of the beast, the lair of a monster whose cruelty I had seen branded into the captain's battered face. But at last I put these fears out of my head, trusting in Jacques' plan and taking comfort in the thought that by this time tomorrow we would be reunited with our ship and back on the open sea.